Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. Yes, that's a carrier. I figured we start the week with something fun. This is, as you can see in the little flag waving on top, a French carrier. This is the Béarn, a Tier 6 premium French carrier. Now, we're not sure that we are going to see a French tech tree line of carriers, but then again, going by the Soviet tech tree carriers and the German tech tree carriers, that is possibly not completely out of the question, but this one's a premium and the first French carrier that we're seeing, so I was very, very curious to see what the ship was about, and it's Tier 6, so I figured I will not get ruffle stomped too heavily, and I'll give it a spin. So, the Béarn, this ship actually existed, but she's had a very, very long and interesting history, not as a carrier, however. So, this thing was effectively one of the Normandy-class battleships that was laid down before the First World War, and then the whole thing stopped because there was a bit of a war going on. And then the French had visited the HMS Argus, the British carrier, and figured we want one of those as well. And went by, oh, maybe we can convert one of the battleships. And then the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty happened, and that sort of sealed it because, you know, they couldn't really have any more. So they figured, well, we'll take one and convert it into a carrier. Which at Tier 6, given that the Normandy is utterly useless and one of the worst Tier 6 battleships in the game, I think it's probably a good thing. So they did that. And it took them quite a while to complete the ship to the degree that she was sort of starting to behave like a carrier and have aircraft training and similar things. And then the Germans invaded rudely and put an end to that whole thing again. When France was capitulating, the Béarn was actually not acting as a carrier, but she was on the way to America to bring gold to the Americans as payment for arms, because the Americans were neutral at the time, but they said, yeah, oh, we totally sell you weapons anyway, because we have nothing to do with that. That is just business. So she was on her way to do that when the French surrendered, and in return she was then diverted to the Caribbean and stayed there for the rest of the war pretty much in a sometimes more, sometimes less disabled and dilapidated state, because the Americans would want to prevent these ships from being used by the Germans, so they were pretty much interned in that area. Towards the end of the war, she then again became available, but became more of a ferry boat because she didn't really work that well as a carrier and was very old at the time. And she's been doing that duty around the world until well after post-war. And in the 1960s, she first became a barrack ship and eventually was then decommissioned and scrapped. But this ship, in some form or other, or bits of it, have existed from 1912 up to the 1960s. So, pretty long career, but she actually never worked as a carrier in combat, either as a training platform or as a ferry boat, for various things. So, enough of that. What you're all curious about is what is special about the Béarn. Well, we have nothing to compare her about, so let's go through. Well, we do have some things to compare her to, but let's have a quick look at what the ship can actually do. So, she gets the British carpet bombers, basically. So you drop the dive bombers are dropping multiple bombs, and she gets the German AP bombs, which is interesting. So we have a bit of a mix here. So more penetration, but they don't cause fires. Now, what we can possibly compare her to, and that is completely not useful. I should really start preparing these sort of things. Let's compare her to the to HMS Furious, because that sort of makes sense. And there we see, so we got the same skill in the Béarn, just with the additional armor-piercing bombs. But other than that, the ships are very, very different. The Béarn is, for a carrier, actually not dreadfully armored, but it's obviously not a ship that is capable of fighting and should not do so. She is very, very slow, which is historically accurate, because even though she did have an engine refit, she never really made an awful lot of speed to begin with. And is not also particularly maneuverable, but then again, it's a carrier. But the 21 knots do mean that you can't extricate yourself if you're being chased by destroyers, for example, or if you're getting yourself spotted. So not being seen and reacting early and moving away from the enemy is a good thing. The gun layout is rather interesting at first glance, because these are 155mm guns. They do have a very good fire chance, and they actually do a decent amount of damage. The range is a bit on the short side, and the reload is excruciatingly long with 10 seconds, but they're 155s. Unfortunately, however, they're 155 single mounts, and they're mounted around the ship, so you can always only use 4 of them at a time. And the dispersion is hilariously bad. So while you might be thinking that you can actually defend yourself from destroyers with these guns, it's not really the case. She has dive bombers, and she actually has a fair amount of them. This is way more than the actual Béarn would have been hosting. I think that thing could, at tops, ferry 36 planes around, but we've got a couple more than that. So we do have 24 dive bombers, and we have 2 dive bomber squadrons under command, which is nice. 3 per squadron, but we only drop 2 bombs, not the 3 bombs that the British would be dropping. In return, they do, at least on paper, more damage. And obviously don't have a fire chance because they are armor-piercing bombs. She then has, to my great joy and exhilaration, and this is one of the reasons why I'm actually showing you this, no torpedo bombers, which makes me very happy because that means I don't need to control them, which I'm not very good at. She has, however, a fair amount of fighters, and these fighters are not actually terrible. So she gets, first of all, she gets 15 fighters, which makes her, if you combine that with the 24, just ever so slightly over what the actual Béarn would have been able to carry. You get 2 fighter squadrons with 3 fighters each, and they are not terrible. Their dogfight efficiency isn't great, but in general, they're actually not bad as fighters go. The AA is absolutely pitiful. So this is this must be well before some of the planned refits of giving her better anti-aircraft firepower. So she really does not have a way to defend herself from enemy air attacks, which means that she does need to use her fighters to do so. And the surface detection with 8.1 kilometers isn't great, but it's workable. Let's compare her actually, just to look at the fighters, how they match up to the Independents, because the American fighters are pretty good, at least from what I understand. And as you can see, they do a bit more damage, but they actually have less HP. And in terms of chasing down enemy aircraft, the Béarn's fighters are actually really good. Not dogfighting enemy fighters, then they're about on par with everybody else, but when it comes to chasing the other things that are not fighters, they are pretty good. So, what can you choose as an elite bonus? Well, you can either reduce the preparation time, or you can make your dive bombers a little better. I initially went with make my dive bombers a little better, because that's her only means of doing damage, and because they are armor-piercing bombs, she can't set fire, so you can't deal damage over time. Also, she has no torpedo planes. Yay! So I figured give them a bit more HP and a better. This is I think attack range is actually dispersion for these bombs. So figured, well, we'll go with that. You get the choice between the historical camouflage, which is blue-gray, and it gives you hit points, bomb damage, fighter damage, and surface detection, which is nice. You can also use the Flower of Steel camouflage, which doesn't look terrible, and I think very similar to what the Dunkirk can get, which gives you fighter speed, fighter damage, dive bomber speed, and bomb damage, but does not give you surface detection or hit points. So I am no expert. I think I've tried both, and the difference wasn't massive, but I think they're both good camos, so whatever you can get your hands on is going to be doing well. Equipment-wise, you probably want to go for the fighter modification. You could go for it would be entirely viable from the numbers to go for the hangar modification, because while you would lose 10% torpedo bomber capacity, you have no torpedo bomber capacity. So this is a free 20% extra dive bombers. But I went with the fighter modification, and I'll explain later why. By the way, if you're new around here, I am not very good at carriers. So take everything I say with a grain of salt here, please. ask somebody who knows what they're talking about. And then I've got the propulsion mod, because AA doesn't make sense because she doesn't have any. And I've got concealment because, well, everything else doesn't really make sense either. Concealment, the best choice here. I am actually not using the extra AA ammo because she doesn't have any AA. So you could try and, buff the whole thing a bit if you wanted to. I figured I'll just go with more concealment. And then the obvious choices for the rest of the things. Now, I have played the ship with two setups. The first setup was a tier 6 commander. So he only gets the aerobatic maneuvers, and exploit weakness isn't super useful, but if you happen to hit something that's already on fire or flooding, then you may as well. The second round was a fully complete set, where I did get the dogfight specialist for better fighters, the dauntless dive for more AP penetration on the bombs, and I actually used the horizontal protection expert. You could maybe also use the citadel strike to do extra citadel damage with the bombs, but again, a topic we'll be talking about in a minute. Also, I don't think there's a legendary commander for carriers. So unless somebody came out and I haven't received him, and we'll just go with a regular one. Consumables wise, the same thing. For the first game with the level 6 commander, I've just used the standard repair kit and damage control, and for the second game, I've used the premiums. So that might give you a little bit of an idea of what the difference in impact is in terms of what if I had a fully upgraded French commander on this thing. Now, so Terry, stop beating around the bush. What is it about this carrier that's special? This is not a carrier that you can use to deal damage to enemy ships, because the dive bomber is absolutely atrocious. They're nice because they drop bombs and you don't need to control them. It's a fire and forget weapon. You assign them to something and they keep chasing it down relentlessly. The problem is that the armor-piercing bombs really struggle to do an awful lot of damage unless you are talking about extremely light cruisers or destroyers. So they don't actually over-penetrate destroyers, but they also do struggle, obviously, to actually hit the buggers. Against harder targets, like battleships, or even enemy carriers, they are relatively useless because they will mostly just get semi-pens at best, and then you do maybe 1200 damage with the 2 wings, or 2000 if you're lucky. That is not the purpose of this carrier. This is not a carrier, at least that's my opinion that I've come to. This is not a carrier in which you do damage to the enemy team. This is a carrier that has 2 purposes. The first one is to completely shut down the enemy carrier using the fighters. And the second one, to spot and relentlessly spot and scout for your team. Now, the problem with that, obviously, is that you're talking about a tier 6 ship, which means a lot of the times you're playing mid-tier and people just, derp around the map and don't really realize what they're doing. But still, making the team aware that there is a destroyer somewhere is better than not doing so. And again, you have 21 knots, so it's not very... It's not an awful lot that you can do to get away when one manages to get its way around. So you are much more a coordinator, a scout, and using your fighters to shut down the enemy carrier. That's kind of what this thing is about, at least in my completely uninformed opinion. So let's see that in action, shall we? The first game is a tier 7 game, domination on big race, and we are facing an enemy Ryujo, a King George, a Poltava, Belfast, Brooklyn, Udachi, and Gnevny. Off we go. So, a scout carrier. So, your job in this thing is basically relatively single-mindedly shutting down the enemy carrier with your fighters, and use your dive bombers for scouting and doing the occasional destroyer drops and things. So I'm going to send my dive bombers over yonder and forget about them for a while, and then I will send my fighters out and see where the enemy carrier is going and what his plans and machinations are. And we'll see if we can scout up there. So we know where the enemy carrier is. Don't be tempted to do things like carrier snipes that you would want to do in a German carrier, for example. Let's see if we can get the enemy fighters to go somewhere, and we redirect the dive bombers against that Gnevny over there. And yes, we have gotten into our dogfight with the enemy fighters, but we should be able to take them down with the 2 fighter wings that we have. We actually have done 3,000 points of damage against the enemy Gnevny, which is good. So now we'll retreat the fighters and wait for the enemy bombers to come in, and then do something about them. Just want to avoid them being shot down by the Brooklyn. But there come the enemy dive bombers and torpedo bombers, so we'll get the fighters in place and start working on these. And while they're busy doing so, I will move forward and try to park myself behind that little island there. So that's the first one shot down. That's the second one shot down. Well, we're wearing them down. So dive bombers are ready again. There was a Gnevny over there. Unfortunately, there's a Brooklyn and a Belfast, which is not particularly up. There is the Gnevny. So let's just keep dropping things on that thing, and while our fighters are making themselves useful. Okay, we've lost 1 fighter wing because there's a Brooklyn, for obvious reasons. So we'll pull the second wing back and try to get the enemy... Nope, I haven't paid attention for a second. And I haven't managed to get the enemy fighters baited, so we might lose that second wing here. But I have another fighter wing coming up already, and we will be able to deal with that. Look, I never said I was good at this, right? Okay, so while my fighters unfortunately have been pulled over the enemy AA, which I have because again I haven't been paying attention. There's a lot of things to do. I have dive bombers ready. That Brooklyn, and unfortunately my team is completely allergic to capping. I've got 2 destroyers on the team and they do nothing, absolutely nothing. It's mid-tier games, there's not an awful lot you can do. So we get the fighter wings back out again and see if we can do something about the these dive bombers, because the enemy carrier is going after our destroyers, and to be fair, that Leberecht Maas is on very, very low hit points. And yeah, but my team's completely bunched up here and cowering in fear of the enemy carrier strikes, such that we are not controlling any of the capture circles. And again, I have managed to get my fighters captured, which is normal. You get used to it. So I am trying my best to actually inflict damage on the enemy destroyers, because the rest of the enemy ships is completely busy just capping and having lots of AA that I don't want to fly my planes in. But as you can see, you actually, well, first of all, you're spotting, and second of all, you're actually doing a really decent amount of damage against destroyers, because while these are AP bombs, they are the penetration is so weak that it doesn't really do an awful lot. Now there is a Udachi over there, which means I'm gonna have to leave my fighters to it for a minute and start moving, because he is coming my way. And that is a very dangerous destroyer. So if he shows up, and I'm spotted, so he knows I'm here. And I'm now starting to take fire from the enemy Brooklyn as well. let's see if we can respot him. Yep, there he is. And again, focus the dive bombers on that thing. Engines on full ahead. And fighters, where are the fighters needed? Not sure, but we have the Yudachi is forced to smoke up. And I have dropped the dive bombers onto him. And yeah, now I do need to get out of here. Just think, yep, there were the Yudachi torpedoes just passing by, I believe. So while the enemy carrier isn't really doing an awful lot at this point, but they are coming some more. I'm going to try and drop the Poltava maybe, but he's got a Belfast for escort, which is not ideal. Maybe I can respot the Yudachi. Yes, there he is. Okay, so dive bombers onto the Yudachi. And fighters out to try and shoot down some of these torpedo planes. Now again, you are in tier 6. You are not going to by yourself shoot the planes down efficiently. And I'm not sure what happened there. I think somebody actually killed the Yudachi from my spotting, so my dive bombers went into nowhere. The problem is my team is still absolutely refusing to cap, even though I have by now shot down 19 enemy planes, and I don't think the enemy carrier has been particularly effective. But yeah, we don't even have something to shoot at, because even the battleships are out of range. So I will try to drop the King George over there, or maybe the Belfast is a cruiser. Maybe we do a little bit more damage here. But yeah, got a couple bomb hits in. But yeah, as you can see, some of them are full pens, some of them are semi pens. But against light cruisers like Belfast, you can do some damage. So light cruisers and destroyers are sort of your primary targets. That Leberich Mars of ours is finally going to cap, but the friendly Yudachi has decided that he is not wanting to do that. The Normandy now goes to cap, but it's way too late, because even though we haven't lost a single ship, the enemy team has literally been having the capture circles, and there's no low health ship that I could actually impact here. So and now we've lost our Belfast. So yeah, not an awful lot we can do. Bombers out. They do some damage, but it really isn't an awful lot. So even if you're using your dive bombers consistently throughout the game, somewhere between 30 and 40,000 points of damage is what you're going to probably achieve. So at this point, 45 seconds left. We're only holding one capture circle, and we only have so far killed 2 destroyers. The rest we haven't managed to kill anything, which means we are about to lose on points. And I could now go into A cap, but it's too late anyway. So we'll redirect the fighters again. But as you can see, we have managed to shoot down 21 planes in over the course of this game, and yeah, that's the sort of thing I think that you're supposed to be doing in the ship. Most of it is, there are a couple full pens. That wasn't too bad. Like I said, cruisers, you can do damage, but not massively so. And we actually came out on top of the team, obviously due to the fact that we've been spotting everybody. It hasn't helped because the team hasn't capitalized on the fact that the enemy destroyers were perma-spotted mostly, and that I managed to pretty much shut down the enemy carrier relatively successfully, at least 22 aircraft destroyed. And yeah, the Ryujo has done even less damage than I have. So, yep. And that brings us to the second game, in which I am playing with the fully maxed out captain. And we are playing center control, and we are top tier. So our opponent this time around is a Weser, and the other ships we are up against are Fuso, Béarn, and Fubuki. This is a 4v4, but I have included this battle for a good reason, because carriers are hideously dangerous against bots because of the fires they can set and the floodings, and because the bots don't damacon. This is not something you can actually capitalize on in the Béarn. So again, just because there are lots of bots in the game doesn't really change my role. I still have to try and do something about the Fubuki and do my best to shut down that Weser. So let's go. Golden Channel. We do have an Anshan on our side and a Ramat, and I have no idea what that is. Is that the Pan-Asian cruiser? I don't know. Could be. But we'll do the same thing again. We're going to get our dive bombers out just across the countryside and start to do some spotting. And then we'll get our fighters to try and intercept the German fighters and clear that as much as possible for ourselves here. Let's see if we can manage to make that happen. And yeah, I am notoriously terrible at baiting fighters, but the German fighters are more interested in chasing down my dive bombers. So one of my fighters is now intercepting. That was I fat fingered that, but we have done some spotting now, and let's get some bombs dropped onto that Fuso. And don't really have anything that's much better suited for that. And we are shooting down a bunch of aircraft because our own fighters are coming, and the German is obviously going for the carrier strike, which makes sense given the quality of his armor piercing bombs and his dive bombers. But you can't rely on your AA because you don't have any. So you do have to rely on the fighters to try and do as much damage as you can. There he comes in again, but doesn't do an awful lot of damage, to be honest. Okay, there's a bot cruiser. That's something we can do some damage to. I think the Fubuki is well spotted, but no, that's not the Fubuki. That's the Fubuki is further back. So we have the Fubuki visible, so we can use the bombers on other stuff, and again trying to send my fighters out, and but yeah, not doing an awful lot of damage here. Sending the fighters out against the enemy fighters and trying to get them into a dogfight, at least over friendly ships this time. So that worked reasonably well, and these fighters are toast, which means I can now again focus on doing something about the enemy dive bombers. And that's pretty much the playstyle of the ship, to be honest. You do get the 2 dive bomber squadrons that you can send out occasionally. Like there's the Fubuki. So let's drop the Fubuki and see if we can make a little bit of a dent in there. And then you manage your fighters and just wear down and shut down the enemy carriers. So there, we've completely destroyed that strike wing. Before it was even capable of getting a strike off, and we were trying to do the same again on these torpedo bombers. I think they have managed to get a torpedo or 2 away, but yeah, they are now very dead. Unfortunately, I've got my fighters captured again in the process. So there's a bot New York, which could be a bit of a problem. So I'm going to send the dive bombers out over that thing. Unfortunately, while my fighters were captured, they were not captured directly over enemy AA, so I can again use them to try and shut down the German carrier. I'm returning the damaged wing for now, and yeah, this would be generally a problem in this position, but it's a bot, so I am trying to use my 150s a little bit, because I am not particularly interested in taking an awful lot more damage, and as you can see, they do absolutely nothing. So that thing's dead probably. Yeah, he's gonna die to. Yes, he died to torpedoes. So we can use the we can use the dive bombers for something else. And let's see what we've got. There's a Fuso coming in over there. So let's redirect the dive bombers on that. And again, do the fighter thing. Nope, never mind. Fubuki spotted. Okay, Fubuki in the cap. That thing needs to die. And use the fighters to deal with incoming airstrikes. And I think at this point the German carrier is running out of dive bombers, so we might have somewhat deplaned that thing. And yeah, as you can see, with the fighter, with some AA assistance, none of these wings actually comes back. I've managed to, by complete accident, I assure you, bait the enemy fighters into fighting over my air zone. And where did that Fubuki go? Let's see if we can re-spot him and send some fighters over there. There's still some dive bombers coming in. Okay, that's an Auba. Well, doesn't matter. We drop it anyway. I think that's the Fuso. So I'm not spotted, so he's probably blind firing. But it does mean I need to move. But again, these German planes don't stand a chance. They don't even make it here. But I'm completely shutting the German carrier down at this point. And we might be able to use our guns a little bit, which of course will get us spotted, theoretically at least. Yep. But I think it's the Fuso is firing at the thing next to me. There's the Fubuki again. Let's send the dive bombers out once more and see if we can finish that off, because the Alba is going to burn down. Nicely done. And I haven't seen the German carrier anymore, so I think he's sort of given up. So I think he ran out of planes, to be honest. And yeah, I'm now spotted. I'm still getting shot at by the Fuso, And the Anshan has taken out the Fubuki, so my airdrops were not necessary at this point. But yeah, I do need to make myself scarce here a little bit. And I think the German carrier at this point is combat ineffective. So we have been holding the... Yep, there come some torpedoes. That's why also I need to get away from here. But we've basically destroyed his approach of doing it, of being able to influence anything, and we've held the cup for the whole period of time. So now it's just a matter of bombing the Fuso a little bit, and we are having a comfortable points lead. So a couple of drops, not doing an awful lot again against battleships, but I haven't seen any German planes in the air for the last minute or two. So we can use the fighters to see if we can actually spot somebody. There is which looks like an AFK Béarn, so they were disadvantaged. The enemy team was disadvantaged to begin with. I don't know where that carrier went, but I do need to make myself a little bit scarce, and maybe we can finish off the Fuso. I think he's on solo health. We may as well just use the dive bombers as well to see if we can spot the enemy carrier and maybe inflict a bit more damage. But yeah, you will not be doing large damage numbers. So if that's something that, where is he? He's not over here. If that's something that's kind of discouraging you, and you want to really get the damage numbers up, then this is probably not the ship for you. But if you're happy to, we'll just send him at the Bayern then. I don't know where he went. So let's just drop. Oh, there he is. Okay, he went all the way around because he probably couldn't do anything else. So perform a little bit more damage. So with the armor piercing improvement from the fully built captain, you're still not going to score like a flurry of citadels. I think I got one at some point against the Dallas, but that was about it. You're not going to do an awful lot of damage. But that's also not what the ship's about. But as you can see, we have almost completely shut down that Weser, and that's kind of what this carrier is. It is a control and scout carrier. You control the enemy carrier and keep them bottled up, and you scout for your team to make sure that they know what's where, and that's where the power of this ship lies. And I have to be honest, this is actually fun because there are no torpedo bombers. You don't have to worry about exploiting damage over time because you can't set any. And you can focus on fighter management quite exclusively, which makes this, I think, an extremely frustrating ship to play against if you're a carrier. So if you are playing carrier, be aware that against this thing, be aware that she does only have 15 fighters. So your only hope is to try be better than the Béarn player in baiting fighters, bait them over friendly AA, and get them destroyed as quickly as you can, because these fighters are your biggest threat. The dive bombers, not so much. She doesn't do an awful lot of damage with them, so just ignore the dive bombers, but you need to take care of these fighters, otherwise the Béarn will just shut you down pretty much. And that's it for me today. Thanks everybody. I hope I made some sense in all of this, but I will see you next time. Bye bye.